Hey, how's it going? I'm standing in front of what was once probably a very popular restaurant. It probably stood for a decade, maybe multiple decades. But what is the reason that popular restaurants such as this suddenly go out of business? The reason may surprise you. Let's discuss. Welcome to Leonard Innovation. My name is Justin Leonard. Thank you for tuning in. Before I explain why restaurants go out of business, be sure to check out my 90-day online launch guide. It's free and it's my gift to you. If I were starting an online business, which steps would I take? Where would I begin? The guide addresses things like how to determine what to sell and how to market your product, or even specific software you can use to run your business. It's maybe an 8-minute read. Again, this is absolutely free. Download it today at leonardinnovation.com/launch. Also, don't forget, if you ever have a business question that you want me to answer on video, go to the homepage, leonardinnovation.com, and submit it via the Ask Justin Q&A form. I'll try to get back to you within 12 hours. When a restaurant closes its door, it can happen for a number of reasons, some of which include poor management, location, rising costs, and competition. Sure, these may all be confounding variables, but how do you explain a restaurant that was in business for more than a decade or even 2 decades, and they suddenly have to shutter operations? I mean, if they lasted 10 plus years, we typically consider that to be a relatively strong, successful business. There is a hidden factor that may not be so apparent to most of us. Can you guess what it is? I'll give you a hint. Oftentimes, when a restaurant closes for business, it's going to be unrelated to any of the reasons we touched on earlier. Any idea? The reason has to do with the commercial lease agreement. Landlords. Commercial lease agreements can be complicated, but don't worry, I'm here to simplify everything. Unlike a residential rental agreement, you typically can't lease year to year in a commercial lease. The landlord is going to want to lock you in, usually for a minimum of 3 years at a time and even 5 years at a time in desirable areas. Now, check this out. When you sign a commercial lease after the first year, the rent typically increases 3% each year thereafter. This usually works out to about an additional $100 increase each year. If the rent, say, is $3,500 a month and you sign a 5-year lease, this is a very basic depiction of how everything breaks down. All right, so the first year you basically pay $3,500 plus a security deposit, so usually another $3,500. Then in year 2, you pay your $3,500 plus 3%. You could see the 105 is actually 3% of $3,500, so that puts us at $3,605. You go to year 3, year 4, and then finally in year 5, we end up paying almost $4,000 at $3,900 and some change. But wait, it gets even better. After you have fulfilled your obligations, so using the same example where we signed our 5-year lease and we've successfully completed all financial obligations, the owner then decides, hey, I kind of like this location. So now they have to extend their lease, right, in order to continue operations. Well, first, you don't really extend a lease. You have to begin a new lease or a renewal. When the lease is renewed, it will jump by a minimum of 20%. And then each year thereafter, it continues to rise by 3%. And each time you renew, it will again jump by 20%. So from our previous example, we ended the 5-year lease at around $3,900. And with a 20% jump, the new lease would start at around $4,700, and then it just goes up from there. At some point, it just doesn't make sense to absorb these increases in perpetuity. In this case, the restaurant owner will probably attempt to negotiate with the landlord, but often the talks will end in futility, leaving the restaurant owner no choice but to close down and seek out another location. By the way, if the restaurant owner fulfills all obligations on the lease agreement, but remains undecided as to whether or not to renew, they then become what is known as a holdover tenant. Usually they can remain in operation on a month-to-month basis, but the rent cost will typically have a holdover fee attached. Entering into holdover status is also risky because at any point, the landlord can kick them out once they find a new tenant. The holdover tenant will then have approximately 30 days to vacate. So you might ask, Justin, is there any way to avoid these incremental leases? The answer is yes. To an extent, every contract is negotiable with a few conditions. The first thing you can do is leverage cash. If you are exploring, for example, a 5-year lease, you can maybe pay 1 or 2 years up front in cash. As part of the cash deal, you would ensure that the rent cost remains constant for the entirety of the lease. The second thing you can do is sign a longer lease in exchange for non-incremental rates. Again, this would be subject to negotiation. National tenants such as restaurant chains will often utilize this strategy in their lease agreements. A third strategy is to try to cap the 3% annual rate hikes. Now, this isn't really eliminating the escalating annual rates. Instead, you would negotiate, a fixed price annual rate hike because percentage increase is always going to be larger than a cap rate. So instead of a percentage, you would want to negotiate the rent not exceed, say, $55 annually. And there are other strategies, but these are the most common. So let's summarize everything. Today, we learned about a unique reason that is generally not cited for why a restaurant might go out of business, and that reason is related to the commercial lease agreement. Essentially, what you have is the rent going up by 3% year over year. Then after all lease obligations have been fulfilled, a tenant that wishes to remain in the location must renegotiate their lease, which comes with a 20% rate hike on the new lease, followed by 3% annual rate increases in perpetuity. Businesses need stability and constants, especially when it comes to pricing. There may be nothing wrong with the restaurant itself, great concept, great owners, but almost no one can survive escalating rent costs forever. Oftentimes, the restaurant doesn't actually go out of business. They simply relocate. Lastly, don't forget to check out my 90-day online launch guide at leonardinnovation.com/launch. It's free and it's my gift to you. And if you found this information helpful, please share it with a friend. Thanks again for tuning in.
Kowalski.
Now remember, many restaurants just won't make it. The reason it's not straightforward, it's complicated. A hidden factor we discuss that's often overlooked. Homie, you gotta understand this stuff ain't in a book. Do you recall? Cause we talked about it, a commercial lease. And if you don't pay attention to it, sales could decrease in the long run. Landlord have you sign and pay the rent. But remember, every year it goes up 3%. I done told you. Don't forget about the other fee. Renewals running 20% for the lessee. I don't have to tell you, man, you know what it is. Justin Leonard, business entrepreneurial whiz. I'm not really rapping, I'm just messing with it. 90-day online launch, go and get it. I'm just up here pop locking. Summarize the lesson, hip hopping.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm digging the content, bro. I mean, you guys are on your way to the top with Leonard Innovation, bro. I really think more people need to check you guys out. Seriously, bro. I'm loving the vision. I see that you got the little hip-hop thing going on, bro. Cool. One of my best friends is African American. But I just wanted to say, bro, keep the momentum going. It's only a matter of time before, this thing really takes off, bro.